Russia was so paranoid that the United States was going to launch a preemptive nuclear attack during the Cold War that it created a dead hand system. What is that? Would launch all of Russia's remaining nuclear weapons, which were like 30,000 at the time, without even needing a hand to push the button. The US Defense Department is thinking of creating some kind of equivalent. Allegedly, Russia never got rid of that.
The whole country is obliterated.
And then you have a 100 to 300 square mile ring of fire producing its own weather. Another example of how paranoid Russia has been for decades is its system that it created called the dead hand. Okay, it's the literal name of it is perimeter. It was this perimeter system, dead hand, was originally reported by a Washington Post reporter named David Hoffman, like in 1999. When he first learned about it, right after the wall had gone down, before we were back to this nuclear threat posturing. But the way the dead hand works is like this. Russia was so paranoid that the United States was going to launch a preemptive nuclear attack against it during the Cold War that it created a dead hand system. What is that? It's kind of like it sounds. They created a system whereby ground sensors would be able to determine nuclear bombs hitting the Russian soil. And if they weren't hearing from the nuclear command and control, so the idea being that the nuclear command and control had been taken out in this preemptive nuclear strike, the dead hand system would launch all of Russia's remaining nuclear weapons, which were like 30,000 at the time, okay? Would launch all of them without even needing a hand to push the button, hence the name the dead hand. So it set up a system to launch no matter what, even if we're all dead. And the idea behind it is kind of part of deterrence. Like, don't you dare launch at us, or even our own dead hand will get you. And so when you think about that, you realize there's a long history of suspicion in Russia. And even more terrifying is I have heard in defense circles, and I haven't been able to confirm it, but I have heard that even now the US Defense Department is thinking of creating some kind of a dead hand equivalent because allegedly Russia never got rid of that system. That's where AI would become a real problem.
Yeah, that's a great point. That is a great point.
The dead AI hand.
Wow, that's a great point. Let's keep with let's go back into what life looks like.
Okay.
So it sounds like, excuse me if I'm mistaken, it sounds like immediate devastation is about 10-mile radius. 100 miles, you're going to feel effects. What happens after that?
So in the scenario, I have the president making this decision. The 6-minute window is upon him. They're waiting for minute 8, 9 to have the secondary ground confirmation from the ground radar systems. That happens. Sir, it's confirmed. The ICBM is coming to Washington. Then I have a situation unfold between the Secret Service and Nuclear Command and Control, based on interviews I did with Secret Service. Once I realized, wait a minute, the Secret Service's job is to protect the president. As soon as the Secret Service learns, the special agent in charge, the SAC in charge of the president, learns that there's a missile coming at Washington, he's moving the president. Period. Non-negotiable. The Secret Service has a CAT team, counter-assault team. They're kind of like the president's version of ground branch, in essence. A lot of guys go back and forth. So the counter-assault team gets called in by the SAC. Within the counter-assault team, there's an even tinier group called the Element. An Element is a 3-man team. A 3-man team is now going to move the president on Air Force One out of the White House, back off. So it's a standoff. Who do you think's going to win? Who has better equipment?
We do.
The CAT team wins. They move the president. much to the chagrin of the Stratcom commander and everybody else who wants that order. While they are moving the president, and there's a problem, because I learned that, getting a little into the weeds here, but there's an EMP which will happen with any nuclear. You're familiar with that. Mm-hmm. Marine One is EMP proof. For listeners, it's an electromagnetic pulse that could very easily fry the electronic system on Marine One, causing it to crash. So the SAC needs to make sure there are parachutes that they can tandem jump the president. They're not in Marine One, a detail I learned. They probably are now, but they weren't then. So the element has to swing by the White House office, grab the parachutes. They need one for the mill aide, one for the guy who's going to jump the president, and one for the SAC. They get them, they get into Marine One. While that is happening, I have in the scenario, a second ballistic missile strikes a nuclear power plant in California. A sub-launched ballistic missile. Now, I had Ted Postal, I'm pointing to this, and Richard Garwin discuss with me whether or not it was plausible, whether or not North Korea can actually get a submarine up to the west coast of the United States, because we know China and Russia can. That's a fact. You learn that later in the book. Can North Korea? Ted Postal believes that they can. Garwin says he doesn't think they can yet. I wanted to have that kind of a debate available for readers to think about. Mm-hmm. You just don't know until you know. I take you through the technology of why Postal thinks it's possible. The North Korean sub-launched ballistic missile fires from a couple hundred miles off the west coast. That takes less than 10 minutes. It's like 6 minutes or something. While the president is deciding whether or not he's going to give this counter launch, and the Secret Service is moving him, the power plant is hit. And when the reason I chose the nuclear power plant to be hit is because it's what's called the devil's scenario. It's worse. It's the worst of the worst case scenario. And I won't get too into the weeds about what happens.
Why not?
I want you to read the book.
Okay.
But no, I shouldn't say it like that. What I mean is the details. If you're me, you almost can't tell the details in a 30-second version, because it's so profound what happens. And it's so terrifying. And people would say that they would never do that. Well, there's actually a rule. It's called Rule 42 in the International Committee for the Red Cross that says you must never strike a nuclear power plant. That's even with kinetic weapons. We're not talking about nuclear weapons. And so when I was doing this scenario, people, that were sort of mentors, are you sure you want to do that? I mean, that's against the rules. It was like, well, that's the point. There are no rules if you're going to play nuclear war. And then, this is before the Ukraine war unfolded. And so when Russia has now exploded weapons around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine, 8 or 9 times they have been on backup generator. That's one step away from losing power. That's one step away from a nuclear core materials meltdown. If you strike a nuclear power plant directly with a nuclear weapon, you will have a nuclear core materials meltdown. The land will be uninhabited all the way to Colorado.
Are you serious? Time is a funny thing. It's so limited, and yet we let it pass by us. We're all guilty of putting important things off until later. If you've been putting off life insurance, check out Fabric by Gerber Life. They make it fast and easy so you can check it off your list right now. Fabric by Gerber Life is term life insurance you can get done today. Made for busy parents like you, all online and on your schedule right from your couch. You could be covered in under 10 minutes with no health exam required. Fabric is partnered with Gerber Life, trusted by millions of families just like yours for over 50 years. There's no risk, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, and you can cancel at any time. And They have over 1,900 five-star reviews on Trustpilot with a rating of excellent. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/srclips. That's meetfabric.com/srclips. MEET fabric.com/srclips. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions.
Fact checked with Los Alamos.
Wow.
That's why I don't want to give it away. I want you to have that experience, Shawn, where you read it and you're just like, how is this possible? And hopefully the only reason you're stopping to read is to go back into the notes to check, is this really true?
So that's like a third of the country.
Rendered uninhabitable. And so that's why the president agrees in the logic of this scenario to the 82 nuclear warhead counterattack, because he learns from his SecDef we just got hit in a nuclear power plant in California. He's going to send the mother load. And that's what he does. And that is why things go awry, is that decision to send 82. So perhaps the only way the scenario might have unfolded differently, and I did this discussion with former Secretary of Defense Bill Perry, because we talked about this a lot, because he thinks about this a lot. He's now in his 90s, and he stopped doing interviews. But during COVID, he and I did a number of Zooms going through these scenarios. And he shared with me that, perhaps a certain kind of president might wait to see the outcome after, might not instill the launch on warning policy, might wait. But once you see a catastrophic attack, the emotions take over, and it's revenge.
What does the middle of the country look like?
50 some odd minutes later, when Russia launches, okay? So because the president makes the decision to launch the 82, as the weapons fly, he launches 50 ICBMs and 32 SLBMs. The 50 can be launched in 60 seconds. That's how long it takes to launch an ICBM once the president gives the command. The joke is, those missiles are called Minutemen because of the Revolutionary War. But the joke in Washington is they don't call them Minutemen for nothing, because they take 60 seconds to launch.
Mm-hmm.
Sub-launched ballistic missiles take 14 minutes from the time the commander-in-chief gives that order. The sub has to get into position. It's a little bit more complicated. 14 minutes. And so as the clock is ticking, Russian early warning systems now move into place. And the Russian early warning systems see the ballistic missiles coming over the pole and interpret them as coming for them. And then there are other, and I went through experts that know all about the Russian early warning systems to take the reader through how this happens. And then you go into the command bunker where the Russian president is with his advisors, who are all almost certainly hawks, who are all almost certainly extremely suspicious of the United States. And they advise him. And so 1,000 nuclear warheads get launched at the United States. So when you ask what happens to the middle of the country, think of 1,000 targets. I have a map drawn based on Defense Department targets, DOE, different documents that have been released over the years, leaked, guesstimated.
The whole country is obliterated.
And then you have a 100 to 300 square mile ring of fire, a mega fire that's now producing its own weather. You have 1,000 of them. People die from blast. They die from, objects flying through the air. they die from immediate radiation poisoning, and they die from fire 1,000 times. And then we talk about the survivors.
Have you looked at what immediate radiation poisoning looks like?
For that, I tell the story of, and again, this stuff is like, okay, where is that information? Well, I found that information. There was a guy called Louis Slotin, who was an original Manhattan Project member. And his death was declassified by Los Alamos. The doctor's report on his death after he died of radiation poisoning. And I sourced that precisely. Throughout the book, as it's a ticking time clock scenario, but I stop and give you little history lessons at moments where you might ask, like you just asked me that question. I give the reader, what does radiation poisoning look like? And I tell the story of Louis Slotin. He was a member of the Manhattan Project, and after the war was over, he was like, I don't want to keep making nuclear bombs. I'm out. And they were like, okay, that's fine, but you have to train the next guy. And so at Los Alamos, they went out into this little site kind of outside of the lab in the forest. The building's still there. It's a historical building now. And Slotin was training the next guy how to like work with the plutonium core, uranium core. Like this is the center of the bomb. And they were doing this experiment that was so dangerous. It was called tickling the dragon's tail. And Slotin is working on this, and it drops. And so everybody takes off. And Slotin, what happens to him is like documented in seconds. He dies 8 or 9 days later. This had been classified for a very long time, but it's been declassified. And you just learn what happens to his body. I mean, where the hands blow up, the skin, essentially peels off. I mean, it just is so grotesque. You really want me to describe it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I mean, they tried everything, like blood transfusions, and your body swells up. They're debriding his hands. They're putting Vaseline on them. His insides begin to, the radiation ruins the lining on your organs. And so you essentially just become like, it almost reminded me of, I read a description once of what happens to an Ebola patient. It's like that, like the lining sloughs away, and so your organs start to merge, and you just have sepsis, and then you get gangrene, and then you die. And when they cut you open, you're just like soup inside.
It's like a blender.
It's a horrific way to die. That's acute radiation poisoning.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.